As adults, we know reading is a lifelong practice. For kids, reading can become more challenging as they grow, and it's meaningful connections, not just access, but meaningful connections with books that make reading enjoyable, makes all the difference, right? For 25 years now, 25 years, Book Trust has witnessed the critical role book choice plays in inspiring, motivated, and engaged readers. Our nonprofit now has impacted a generation of readers, of learners. We heard from some of these alumni recently at our 25th anniversary gala, and just their remarks and testimonials, and the impact was palpable. Hearing now adults recount how, as students, elementary students, Book Trust books were the first books of choice they got to own and keep and write their names in and take home and share with siblings, and how that simple but profound act impacted their reading journey, their educational trajectory, their careers, and now how they, as parents and caregivers, infuse that culture of reading and connections to books in their homes was just amazing. The students who stick with reading are the ones who find books worth returning to. And that's where choice matters. Today, we're going to hear from our expert team at Book Trust and others in the field of education and children's literature to explore perspectives on the role of choice, book choice. If you're joining us virtually today, feel free to add questions in the comment section. We will answer them at the end if time allows. I am Ben Reuler. I'm the proud Vice President of Development here at Book Trust, a national early literacy nonprofit organization that's sparking joyful reading experiences for tens of thousands of students across the country each year. My amazing colleague, Alli, our Vice President of Program at Book Trust, is leading this joyful reading charge. Alli, let's jump right in. We know research and testing and feedback loops are paramount for how we roll at Book Trust. Thanks to your leadership and your team's work, along with our research and evaluation partners, thousands of educators across the country completed our teacher survey last school year and reported that students often find personal meaning in the books they select. And this connection, this meaning contributes to joyful reading. Teachers also observed that reluctant readers were more willing to participate when they could choose books that resonated with them. Alli, what's the connection between book choice and joyful reading? And how does it show up in Book Trust's book access program? And what do we hope to see?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And I'm so psyched to be here and chat with y'all. So let me just share a little stat. In 4 decades, the proportion of middle schoolers who never or hardly ever read for fun has nearly quadrupled. So I think it was like 8% in 1984 to closer to 31% by 2023. So, and the kids who read almost every day in 1984, it was close to 35% down to just 14%, which is, as a reader myself and a community of readers I know we're speaking to now, that is deeply shocking. And so, by the time students hit middle school, many have already decided whether they're, readers or not. And so I look often to experts in the field who are doing and thinking about this work, like literacy scholar Elena Forzani. I think I'm saying her name right. She's at Boston University, and she says that we're teaching kids to read in a content and motivational vacuum. And those early years are when that damage really gets done. When kids decide that, reading is something that they can do and identify with, and that love of reading hopefully really takes root. So when students read because they have to, they may eventually learn to read, the functional skill, but they don't necessarily become readers. And so reading stays something that they do for us, for the grown-ups, and not necessarily for themselves. But when students read because a book genuinely speaks to them, students who are intrinsically motivated spend 300% more time reading. And that means like 3 times more practice in those early critical years. So, to answer your question, at Book Trust, choice is just one way that we aim to engineer joy into the experience while kids are still forming those really critical reading identities. So, 3 times a year, students in grades pre-K through fifth grade get to pick books that they are interested in. We don't pick them for them. Books that, oftentimes reflect their lives, spark their curiosity, help them connect with other people, books that their peers are choosing. We really want students to believe that they are readers before those, more challenging middle school years hit. So in a world where, 92% of 8 to 12-year-olds are already on social media getting hit with like infinite distractions, we give them a reason to turn the page while they're still young, before reading becomes something that they feel like they have to avoid rather than something that they seek out.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. Alison Angell, welcome to the panel. You are the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships for Scholastic Reading Events, and you're just a remarkable human. I love leaders like you. Super smart, you know how everything works, no ego, and just kind of find a way to get things done. And you're just a great friend and partner to Book Trust. It's always a privilege to see you in action moving through the world. But I digress. You and your team do incredible mission-driven work. We know because Book Trust has partnered with Scholastic for 25 years, since our founding, pretty much. And you've led strategic partnerships for more than a decade, expanding access to books and literacy opportunities for children in underserved communities. We know what we believe about the power of choice on reading engagement at Book Trust. How does the team at Scholastic think about the power of choice? What's your ethos on this?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Ben. And I am so honored to be here. Scholastic shares a mission with Book Trust to inspire all kids to become lifelong readers and learners. And so we're just really honored to walk side by side with you in that. To answer your question, kids engage most deeply, as everyone here has already said, when they can choose what excites them. And that choice is really at the heart of everything that Scholastic does. We see that when kids choose the books that they want to read, they're more motivated to read, they keep reading, and we're lucky that we've been able to also see this for generations of readers. And our ethos is what you asked about, really simple. Choice leads to engagement. Engagement builds lifelong readers. So this is why we offer such a wide selection of books for kids to choose from, books that we hope appeal to all ages, all interests, all backgrounds. Yeah, this sense of agency of seeing a book and feeling drawn to it and imagining yourself in its pages creates that spark that you see in Book Trust classrooms,
Mm.
that strengthens reading experiences that teachers are creating in the classroom. And so, yeah, that's really why our partnership with Book Trust is so meaningful to us. Together, we're ensuring that every kid can choose books that they'll love reading and that they'll keep reading.
Thank you. Beautifully said. And I love how you use that word spark. Spark is a word we use a lot at Book Trust, right? How do we spark meaningful, joyful experiences and connections to books? And Alli, back to you quickly. Can you share some examples of how Book Trust supports students in this spark in connecting with the titles they've chosen? So, yes, they choose books, they have agency, they get the books, but that's not enough, right? Access isn't enough, choice matters, but then there's the connection, the ongoing connection and the joy and the spark that Alison just mentioned, right? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna just talk briefly before I directly answer your question about this graphic novelist that I know family members of mine have been sort of obsessed with because he said something recently that really resonated with me. So his name is, and I apologize if I say this wrong, but Kazu Kibuishi, who wrote the Amulet series, which is a super popular graphic novel series. He said he was quoted recently as saying, and I want to read this verbatim. I don't really buy that kids are not reading anymore because I see the opposite all the time. I find kids to be really good readers and voracious readers. And so, as much as we are concerned about the student perception of, do I want to read? Can I read? All of that, that's still very important, as we talked about earlier. But he's right. I mean, we see this all the time in book trust classrooms, like especially when we're talking about elementary age kids, they want to read. And I'm very excited to hear from our other panelist who's actually sitting in a classroom right now who can speak to this, in detail. But, from my experience, like we are dealing with some real competition right now. Like even young kids today are being like conditioned by this super fast moving digital content. Um, their minds, as Kibuishi says, like are encoded to get information as fast as possible. And so if we don't capture their hearts and their minds in pre-K through fifth grade, we're at greater risk of losing them. So much so that before even like kids browse our books, we make sure that teachers have these low lift classroom activities designed to get kids talking and connecting about their interests, their experiences, their communities, their worries, their aspirations, all in the hopes of starting to form a really positive reading identity grounded from a place of curiosity. So, one of our Hawaii teachers shared with us recently children were so excited to talk about the kinds of books that they like to read and share what they like to read. And so that self-discovery is incredibly important, especially with our young learners, because they're still figuring out who they are. We all are, but especially when they're, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. So instead of starting from a place of talking about, skills they don't have yet and skills that they need to develop, we're working in partnership with families and schools and communities to make sure that kids can start from this place of wonder and possibility. And so with Book Trust, then we have this like selection process. So they get to choose the book, they have the selection process. And thanks, again, to our long running partnership with Scholastic, kids have access to so many titles. Graphic novels, picture books, early chapter books, nonfiction, books in English and Spanish, some are in both. And teachers play the role of helping them connect some of their early reflections on what they like, what they don't like, what they're interested in to the books that they have to choose in front of them. And so we don't just stop at ownership. So once the books actually get there, we have this celebration toolkit that we hope gives teachers some quick, easy references to continue the conversation they started before the kids even selected the book. So creating those opportunities for connection in their classroom, building that excitement and energy around new additions to kids' libraries. And so, once one activity that we provide in the toolkit is students, after they've read the book, can create their own alternate book covers after reading the book. So if they would think, if I'm the illustrator, what would I put on the cover? And so one teacher shared with us that my students really enjoyed being able to create their own book covers because they were discussing their ideas with their classmates and they were excited to share their creations. And another teacher had worked with older students as part of the celebration toolkit to read to younger grades. So the kids really enjoyed going down to the lower grades and reading to them. And she said they took the time to help the younger students with their reading skills as well. So things like reading circles, book talks, cross grade partnerships, all of this happening in elementary school. And the last thing I'll say is, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, I think, is we make sure that we're working on extending this into the home with these conversation starters that are, meant to work for all ages. Just these simple prompts that help try to turn "Did you read?" into more real conversation.
And I can attest they literally work for all ages because I've even participated in some of our pilots with them and I've loved them. as a grown-up. It's really helped me identify my own identity as a reader and the book conditions that I enjoy, and it's made me excited about the culture of reading in my own little world. So, thank you. And you mentioned our third panelist, a great segue. Colleen Horvay, welcome. What a busy day for you. You are joining us right from your classroom in Philadelphia. So thank you. Thank you for your work on the front lines of education. And thank you for being here and for preparing children for success in school and life as a kindergarten teacher.
Thank
Um, I know you, Colleen, have 20 years of teaching experience in Pennsylvania. Tell us about a time when, excuse me, when book choice and joyful reading came together in your classroom.
I am instantly thinking of something that Allie mentioned. In our school, we started Book Trust a few years ago, and the coordinator for our building at that time really wanted to make it a celebration. So she did create this schedule and these ideas where the eighth grade would come with the kindergarten, and we would make delivery day a big celebration. So it was something that started with the initiation of Book Trust in our school, but we've continued it. So at that time, we were receiving books every month. We're not receiving books every month anymore, but we're continuing that monthly celebration of bringing those grades together. And when they do get together, it's just this beautiful community moment where the younger students are taking ownership of the books that they selected, and the older students are asking them questions. So they're having conversation and they're having dialogue, and they're just celebrating this moment where, reading is valued, and being a reader is important. Another time that I think of when, that joyful moment came together was when our recent delivery day. Many of the students had picked the same book, but I've created this system where, throughout the weeks after we get our delivery, I'll let them give me their books for read aloud time right before the end of the day. So I had just read a book, and it was another student's turn to give me their book selection. And it was the book they handed me was the same book that I just read, I just read that book and I was like, oh, this is the one I just read. And the student was like, yeah, but this one's mine, so it was just this moment of, this is powerful. This is impactful, the meaning and memories and just the purpose is happening. The purpose of the program is definitely happening.
Oof. Thank you. That's powerful. Oh, yeah, and we heard again from some of our alums recently, like the pride and ownership. This is mine. I get to see, feel, touch, write my name in it, take home, and the conditions of the book joy. Like we are not reading because we have to. We're engaging with books because we get to. And the conditions that the educators are creating on the front lines in the classrooms for students to have those sparks that Allison mentioned, those joyful reading engagements with books of choice. That is how we are combating the literacy crisis, to Allie's point of really getting folks young with loving the experience of engaging with books. Um, Allison, back to you. What books or topics are popular with children right now?
Oh, I love this question. This is so fun. Um, on the elementary side, let's see, dragons are trending strongly across really all ages. Animal stories are perennially popular, including stories about unicorns and other fantasy creatures. We see nonfiction books about nature and animals are really hot right now, especially with elementary readers. These are books like things about natural disasters, like tornadoes and tsunamis and wildfires, as well as books about rocks, like gemstones, birthstones, always popular. And then animal stories that range from cute, cuddly puppies to sharks and megalodons. And right now in the animal world, the big trends are axolotls and capybaras. And then we see popular TV and movie property connection titles are always popular. Things like Spidey and Bluey and Gabby. We see sports are always popular. Right now, soccer is having a very big moment. And Alli, to your point, graphic novels and manga formats are really big right now, even in middle grade. And then what else? Food titles like the Food Group book series and books about things like boba tea and gummy bears are also really popular right now. So go figure.
I definitely have the best job on the planet when I'm literally getting paid to engage in discussions about how dragons are trending strongly right now. Like, how cool that we get to be in this space. I love it. Thank you for sharing that and for offering that insight from your purview. Um, Allie, with all these options available to kids, what role does curiosity and book choice play for more reluctant readers?
I just want to say that I still don't know what an axolotl looks like. Or if I even said that right. So I'm so glad that that came top of mind. Um, all right, Ben, I'll ask, I'll answer your question. Um, so, as I've said a few times now, choice is so critical in those early elementary years when kids are starting to form those core beliefs about whether they're readers or not. Um, in true me fashion, doing a lot of reading in preparation for this conversation. There's an expert at the University of Florida, Holly Lane, said it pretty clearly that I can't say it any better. Nobody likes doing something that they're not good at. They may love the idea of reading, but they don't like the act of reading, which, to me is just so succinct and powerful. So by the time the kids reach high school, if they haven't developed that love in those early years, reading has become something that they tend to avoid. And so it really does start with when kids don't find books that connect to them, that don't speak to them, when reading becomes this more of like a chore instead of a choice. And so we hear from teachers all the time that when a young, reluctant reader gets to choose books that match their interests, whether it's about axolotls or dinosaurs or capybaras or princesses or sports or what have you, they suddenly lean in. And so there was a story that we heard recently from a teacher where one early elementary student who never engaged during reading time chose a book about space exploration. It's something that they've been curious about for a while outside of school, but never really had a space to bring it into the classroom because it wasn't something that they were learning about at the time. So the teacher said it was like a switch had flipped. That child started asking for more books, sharing facts with classmates, and actually sitting there and engaging with the text. And so choice, just through those examples, I think, really gives reluctant readers access to their own curiosity at an age where they're naturally have a lot of questions. But the reality is that and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we're competing with some pretty serious forces. I think the stat is 65% of 8 to 12-year-olds have smartphones, and 92% of those kids are on social media. This educator, Carl Hendrick, who I've mentioned before, he uses the term weaponized distraction, which are basically algorithms designed with this extraordinary level of sophistication to try and grab your attention, which we're all privy to. And so even our youngest students are affected by this. And so Book Trust, we're really working to combat this level of distraction, which we aim to scaffold really carefully. Um, and so teachers are obviously the folks that are in the room building community, connecting with young people, and they are the ones that really help find books that are both challenging but not overwhelming, and we want to celebrate that effort. And so our goal is to really create that space for kids to talk about their books with their peers, even as pre-readers, building reps to have positive associations with books, as well as that social connection, which we know can be an important glue when building those positive reading identities with kids.
Thank you. We've got time for I have a couple more questions, but we're getting close to time. This is amazing. Colleen, as you know as well as any of us, each young student and each young reader is unique, might be different, very different from the student they're sitting next to, their classmate. Um, and their motivation to read is unique as well. What strategies work best for tapping into the unique needs of each young reader?
That's a great question. And in kindergarten, it's really important for the teachers to find those answers to those questions. It makes me think of something that happened recently in my classroom with a student who entered the room, and anytime I would suggest or instruct the students to read a book, he would say, I can't read. I can't read." And then have multiple stories of iPads, right? What he did on his iPad last night. And then he came up to me recently and he said, "Miss Horvay, you need to get more Batman books. I probably have about 200 books in my classroom," right? And I said, "I have Batman books," because in my mind I did. And he was like, "Nope, you only have 3." And so I spent, a couple days later, I was like, I have to have more than 3 Batman books. He went through every book I had in the classroom and he realized he We're dismissing, sorry. Um, I went through all the books I have in my classroom and he was right. I only had 3 Batman books. And so I made a promise to him that, yes, I will purchase more Batman books, because if that's what's going to make you a reader and you're going to become, the person that says I can read, then I'll get the books that you like. And so it's just moments like that. And that all about the reader engagement activity that we did in the beginning, that opened it up so many more conversations in our classroom. I mean, the kids were really engaged and they were like, "Me too," and they're having these conversations and finding out what's the same and what's different about them as readers. It really is just all about starting that conversation, having the question presented to them, and they'll give you the answers.
Thank you. And yeah, shout out to Alli, Lee, and our team at Book Trust for continuing to evolve Book Trust into the most modern, relevant version of itself. And part of that is starting to really pilot and hear feedback from teachers around these joyful reading engagements like the, All About Me as a Reader activity. Really powerful as we think about the book conditions and our identities as readers and meeting students where they're at as unique readers. Um, Alison, going back to you, how can we work together to preserve access to a wide range of children's books for the reasons Colleen, just touched on?
Yeah, oh, I love that story, Colleen. Um, first we have to protect the fundamental idea that every child deserves both access and this type of agency that Colleen just mentioned. Kids need this access to a wide variety of books and topics so that they are choosing their interests. And this is, as we've said many times on this call, how we motivate them to read. And then we have to ensure that we're reaching every child. And so this is why our work with Book Trust is so important, and it's helping to expand our reach to under-resourced classrooms and ensuring that all students can experience the joy of choosing books that feel meaningful to them.
Thank you. And last question for Allie, but to your point, Allison, about our work, our partnership together over 25 years, we are talking about over 10 million books, 10 million books that Book Trust and Scholastic have distributed to students, books of choice to over 500,000 students across the country over 25 years, books that they choose, keep for free, regardless of family ability to pay, at largely Title I schools. That is a lot of books and a lot of students and a lot of choice and a lot of agency. And that's why these partnerships are so important. My last question is for, again, my esteemed colleague, Allie, who I learned so much from. We've talked all day today about the power of book choice being so real and so important. It's making a difference in classrooms across the country. What's one way that caring adults can build on this outside of the school?
Yeah. So if you take anything away from this conversation, I hope it's this. The reading habits that kids build in pre-K through 5th grade are the ones that carry kids through or will fail them by middle school. It gets 10 times harder in middle school. So I think that you heard this from Miss Horvay, like just ask them. ask ask a kid about a book that they chose and like actually listen to the answer, not did you finish your reading? Did you get your 15 minutes in? Where's your reading log? But like, what made you pick that one? What's your favorite part so far? You're telling by asking those kinds of questions instead of the sort of performative checkbox of finishing the task, you're telling a kid that their choice matters, that their voice matters, and that you are helping to build that foundation that will sustain them when reading gets much harder in the later grades. And so, even the young kids that we've talked about that are having to compete their attention with screens. I read a lot about Marianne Wolf, the literacy scholar, and she says that kids today are actually reading the equivalent of about 100,000 words every day. But these are text messages, social media posts, memes. It's rarely what she calls continuous, sustained, or concentrated. It's one sort of fractured burst after another. And so that's not the same thing as building muscle through more sustained practice, which ultimately enables kids to get to that place where they're in a state of flow and get lost in the story. And so you could, in addition to just asking kids questions, you can go to a library or a bookstore together. Just let them browse and trust their instincts. Even if they pick a graphic novel or something that you feel might be too easy, those positive experiences will compound over time.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our amazing panelists. I am so grateful to have got to share space with you. We know book choice is a key ingredient in fostering a genuine love of reading. The more we support children in exercising their agency to choose and own books that they love, the closer we come to ensuring all children can read at grade level by fourth grade for all the reasons Alli just mentioned. Book Trust is part of the solution, and there are many ways to support our nonprofit's work. If you're able, please consider donating to our end of year campaign, booktrust.org. Donate, check our website. It's easy and safe to donate. Every dollar matters. Help getting books of choice and these joyful reading experience to these students in classrooms like Miss Horvay's. And please amplify our work. Follow us at Book Trust USA on socials, engage, repost, subscribe to our newsletter, invite your friends to things like this. We'll be doing more virtual stuff throughout the spring and summer and ongoing. Every little bit helps. Combating this literacy crisis takes a village. Thank you for being a part of ours. And again, tip of the cap and a warm, a warm heart to our panelists. Happy reading, everybody. Peace.